So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting on Monday, July the 8th. An unusual one because it's a Monday, so hopefully people don't arrive for the one that we would normally have tomorrow. The webcast has started, so we're online, and I need to read you a housekeeping statement. Thank you for attending this meeting of Cabinet. Whilst this meeting is open to the public, it is being recorded and broadcast live on the County Council's website and will be available for repeat viewing. It may also be recorded and filmed by the press and public. Filming or recording is only permitted in this room whilst the meeting is taking place, so must stop when the meeting is either adjourned or closed. Filming is not permitted elsewhere in the building at any time. We're not expecting a fire drill, but in the event there is a fire alarm, please vacate them via the main reception or one of the emergency exits across the hall. So apologies for absence, we're all here, so I think we should be fine with that one. Declarations of interest. Anybody has any declarations of interest to give? No? All good. Confirmation of minutes. We've got the minutes of the meeting last held on the 16th of April. Can I propose that that they're accepted if there aren't any amendments or changes? Everyone happy?
Okay.
Agreed. Okay. So they are agreed as a correct record. Chairman's announcements. I've got a few different things to say. Obviously, it's been an exciting few days, maybe less so for us than others. Congratulations to the new government and congratulations to all of our MPs. We have 9 returning MPs and 6 new. We've written to them all and had a positive response from them coming back to us to talk about the county and how we can help them, and we'll be meeting them next Monday online to do that. As I think I've said often before, and you'll get bored of me saying, but none of us come into this to do any harm, and we only disagree about how we do good. And so on that basis, we look forward to working with all of the 15 new MPs covering Hampshire, regardless of their party, to ensure that we do the best we possibly can for all of our residents, because that's what we're here to do. A few other quick things to tell you about the future services timetable. You'll have noticed that the SP25 meetings that were scheduled now have all been delayed until September and October. Just to reassure people, we are still heading for those select committees and then for the Cabinet meeting, which will now take place at the beginning of October. So we're looking forward to our colleagues scrutinising those, and members of the Cabinet will be in attendance at each of those meetings. If the proposals are agreed, then the changes to services wouldn't take place until April 2025. So in that respect, we have time to make those changes. But as I've been clear before at the council meeting and other comments that we've made, these are only proposals. We want to hear what the select committees say. And while the officers have put in an enormous amount of work and we respect the work that they've done, we equally need to take into account the response to the consultation and to take a look at the impact that those changes might have on our residents. And so we will be doing so, and we will be taking into account all of the different responses that we have, not least from our colleagues in the select committees, before making those decisions. And the huge public response to the consultation between January and March, I think, leads us very much to look at some particular areas where we might want to consider the impact that they have. When we were talking at the annual council, I wanted to equally talk about the way in which we should still be really positive about the work that we do. Times are tough. We are having to make some really difficult decisions, but that doesn't stop the work that goes on within the county council. And there are many thousands of people who work for us who do a fantastic job day in, day out. And so each time we have a meeting, what I want to do is to highlight some of the work that those teams are doing. So this today, I hope you'll indulge me just while I tell you about a couple of the teams that work for us. The adults delayed discharge work. So we're talking today about some of the adult social care work that we're doing. And Hampshire hospital discharge performance has remained at exceptionally high levels, despite having to operate with reduced service levels in the last financial year. Over 21,000 people were supported to leave hospital last year by our teams with the direct support of HCC and the wider health and care community partners. These services are delivered by Hampshire's hospital social work teams, our reablement and occupational therapy teams, and our discharge to assess services within care and support, who work alongside independent sector providers and NHS partners 365 days a year. Through these services, a great many Hampshire residents are safely returned to their own homes to live as independently as possible each year. And we should recognise the efforts of all staff, volunteers and families in supporting this vital area of our collective activity. We're also talking about finance today, and I think that's pretty much an unsung part of the organisation. But following significant work by the finance team, we once again published our draft year-end accounts in line with the legal timeframes. That's not something that every council does. So there's huge credit to Rob's teams in providing that information in a timely fashion. I'm sure none of us can fully appreciate the amount of time and effort that goes into producing some 208 pages of complex financial statements for the County Council and Pension Fund, but it is a credit to the finance team to have achieved it again this year, when many other councils are struggling to complete theirs. And finally, we should just mention the work of property services. In Universal Services, the property services team have designed and delivered and are now beginning the construction of 2 new Hampshire primary schools scheduled for opening in September 2025, with a third starting on site this month. Creating 3 new primary schools in the same year for the first time in decades, the schools will provide a total of 1,179 places for pupils arising from 3 major developments in Hampshire, each one designed to become a focus at the heart of its new community. Talking about Universal Services, congratulations to a couple of our officers, Tim Lawton and Nicola Waite. So Tim works in Universal Services as our director in charge of highways, and both he and Nicola have gained industry recognition for their contributions to transport delivery. Tim's the Assistant Director for Highways, Engineering and Transport, and received the prestigious Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation Professionalism Award. This award is given to senior leaders to recognise their sector expertise and influence. Tim's been with us for 36 years. He is one of the nicest people I know, I have to say that. And he is, I can't think of anyone better, more deserving of this to do that. Nicola is our transport team leader in Hampshire 2050. She was shortlisted as a finalist for the Transport Planning Society's Transport Planner of the Year award, which was supposed to be announced on Thursday. Now, Thursday was a bit of a busy day, so they haven't got round to announcing it as yet. So our fingers remain crossed for her, and hopefully we'll hear at some point in the next sort of 48 hours as to whether she is indeed the winner of the award or not. But she certainly should be. She's done a brilliant job for us. I wanted to also just talk very briefly about devolution. We have begun. We've begun to talk further to our partners in neighbouring authorities, and I spent a really useful afternoon with Councillor Fielker, Lorna Fielker, who's the leader of Southampton City Council, on Friday, who was more chipper than I was, but possibly more tired after her celebrating. But I think there is a really good opportunity for us to begin to talk to, begin those conversations around devolution again, which I know have been a challenge in the past, but there is a new optimism around that. And certainly, as I've been going around and having conversations with the leaders of the districts and boroughs within the county, there's a new pragmatism, I think, around how we might be able to bring that forward, which is a really positive thing. And talking about devolution, there's a sad piece of news. You might remember that when we were talking about devolution before, between 2021 and 2023, we were helped by Sir Howard Bernstein, who was a previous leader, chief executive rather, of Manchester. He was an enormous help to us at that time, and very sadly, he passed away last month. And he was everything he was reputed to be: knowledgeable, warm, charismatic, and generous with his insights. And I know many of us were in meetings with him over that period. So on behalf of Hampshire County Council and all of us here, I'd like to send our condolences to Sir Howard's family and friends. The desegregation of the LEPs has now completed, and we've had our first meeting of the Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board last month on the 11th of June, which I was privileged enough to chair. That went really well, and we have some really great engagement from the business community in Hampshire as we bring that forward. We received welcome confirmation in May that Hampshire's Skills Bootcamp training will be available for a further year, thanks to an award of £3.8 million from the Department of Education. And the County Council is also delighted to be partnering once again with the Business Magazine on the Hampshire Business Awards 2024. Nominations for 16 awards categories close on the 30th of August. So go to the Business Magazine's website for more information and to apply. Do please apply, businesses that are out there, because it's a great thing for us to be involved with. Nearly there. So Year of Health and Wellbeing. 2024-25 is Hampshire 2050 Partnership's Year of Health and Wellbeing. During this year, members of the Hampshire 2050 Partnership, which include local councils, the NHS, business leaders, universities and charities, will showcase how a diverse range of organisations and sectors can take positive action to promote good health and well-being in Hampshire's population. The aim of the year is not to fix all of Hampshire's health and well-being challenges, but to bring greater focus to the wider determinants of health and well-being and encourage greater collaboration between the county's leading cross-sector partners. There are strong interdependencies between good population health and well-being and a robust economy, good employment practices, education and skills opportunities, community cohesion, digital inclusion, our physical infrastructure, and the way we travel, access to nature, availability and quality of housing, climate resilience, and so on. Everything, basically, I think I should have said there. We also know that a healthy and well population is good for our economy and businesses, our learners, and the broader societal outcomes for residents and communities across the county. A collective and coordinated focus across all of our 2050 partners will be paramount in influencing and driving change. The Hampshire Health and Wellbeing Board has endorsed 3 priority areas for the 2050 partnership to focus upon. These are physical activity, mental health, and childhood obesity. As the executive members for Hampshire 2050, Councillor Huggins and I are looking forward to the formal launch of the Year of Health and Wellbeing in the autumn, and to working with Cabinet colleagues and our fellow Hampshire 2050 partners to ensure the County Council plays our full part in the year's activities. We've got an event here in this room in September where we're going to be launching that. Finally, the fostering campaign. So the County Council's Fostering Services has launched a new campaign this summer to find more loving homes for children in care. In Hampshire, a child comes into foster care every 12 hours, which is a rather sobering thought. Do please look out for the social media campaign that's around it, for our adverts, and to look online. I know from our own personal family experience the amazing work that foster parents do. They really do turn around the lives of children who have had some pretty grim experiences. And I am in awe of the foster parents who looked after our children and the many that I meet along the way in my other world of adoption. So I would encourage anybody to take a look at that. So that's pretty much us done. We have a slightly different way of working this time in the respect of inviting members to come along and talk to us, as they always have done, but I really encourage members to come and become engaged in these cabinet meetings. And if they were here, the select committee chairs, but we fear that they might be coming tomorrow morning. But there we are. So hopefully we will have some more interactive conversations around what is also a bit closer cabinet table, so we're not quite so far away from one another as we have been before. That's me done. So deputations. Now, Joe, we didn't have any formal deputations sent in to us, but Mrs. Perry has arrived and would like to, unfortunately there's a bit of a mistake with registering to do to give a deputation to this meeting. What I have agreed is to use Chairman's discretion to allow Mrs. Perry to say a few words if she wishes when we get to the minerals and waste item. And also we've got Councillors Porter and Wallace, who are here both to talk on the minerals and waste item, number 7, and also Jackie would like to talk on the social care ombudsman determinations and health and social care resilience, and also the end of year financial report. So you're very welcome to speak on all of them, Jackie, and we'll be interested in your contributions at that point. So I think that's me done. You'll be glad that I'm going to shut up now and allow Gary to come and introduce the first item to us, which is driving towards economic strength. Gary.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. So the report you have before you is the recurring Driving Towards Economic Strength report, which over recent years has maintained an organisational focus on the importance of a strong and prosperous economy and economic growth in relation to improving outcomes for residents and communities across Hampshire. The report provides the usual economic insights since the previous Cabinet report, and there are some real positives in there, including inflation now getting to 2%, and therefore hitting the Bank of England target for the first time since July 2021. We're yet to see this to translate into lowering of Bank of England base rates, which have been held at 5.25%. As I have said previously, medium-term economic growth and investment is still characterised by uncertainty and the challenges and risks of raising capital and finance. That said, we've continued to see significant mergers and acquisitions and investment activity in Hampshire, and there are a number of really high-profile examples pulled out in paragraph 38 of the report. And Cabinet will also see reference in the report to the strength of the labour market in Hampshire, with an employment rate of well above 80%, which is well above the national average. The report then, as the leaders mentioned, makes reference to the successful local enterprise partnership integration that took place in April 2024, noting that LEP responsibilities have transferred to upper-tier local authorities. In doing so, I'm very pleased to report that we have immediately established our Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board, which provides the overarching business-led governance to oversee our new responsibilities. A primary role of this board is to oversee the update of our economic strategy, which sets the strategic foundation for our nationally and internationally significant economic region, encompassing over 60,000 businesses and a GDP close to £50 billion every year. And what that does, it will recognise the pivotal role that our region will play in driving much needed growth, investment and productivity in UK PLC. Finally, you'll see in the report that the County Council has successfully taken on new responsibility for strategic programmes for our area, including the Careers Hub, Skills Bootcamps and Growth Hubs, working with business providers and skills providers to provide business support, careers advice and targeted sector-specific skills provision for our area. This includes additional national responsibility for the funding Hampshire as the upper tier lead for the wider regional growth hub for our south central area, including our neighbours in Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight, as well as Surrey, West Sussex, Brighton and authorities across Berkshire. So Cabinet, we travel really optimistically moving forward with lots of effective and hard work done to establish our new responsibilities and associated governance over the last 6 months, and I now refer Cabinet to recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 4 in the report and welcome any questions.
Thanks very much, Gary. Before I open the floor to my colleagues, obviously one of the good pieces of news of the last few months has been the return to 2% inflation, and that the uncertainty that higher inflation brought for us over the last year or so has been a drag on economic growth. Do we have any sense of what the prospect for that is going forward? Is there a risk still around it, or do we have any certainty around how that might look? I'm asking you to get your crystal ball out and tell me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit of crystal ball gazing, isn't it, in terms of are we going to hold that 2% or not? And as you've said, Leader, it's been a significant driver of both international and national and therefore regional economic uncertainty. Those high rates of inflation put significant pressures on businesses in terms of their cost base, whether that's labour market inflation, borrowing costs, significant energy costs that we've seen across many sectors, and then that's passed on to consumers in terms of cost of living pressures and so on. So this is the first time in pretty much 3 years to the month where we've had that inflation back to 2%, and Cabinet will note it's been as high as 11%, best part of 18 months ago. As the report notes, the Bank of England, which is a much better authority than I am around this, remains optimistically cautious, I would describe it as. So they have maintained rates at 5.25%, saying essentially once you get to 2%, the challenge is now consolidating and maintaining in and around 2%. But translating what that means for Hampshire, I think it's fair to say we're not out of the woods yet, but maintaining that cautious optimism that the Bank of England has identified, and really leveraging what I've said in the report, which is we're now at the cusp of Hampshire now leading the economic recovery and growth, which we'll see nationally and internationally, and making sure we're in the best possible position to exploit those factors around our world-leading infrastructure, our hugely impressive skills base, and then those really important sectors which will drive the economy of both our region and the national economy over the next 2 or 3 years, whether that's around maritime, whether that's aerospace, whether that's financial services, and really leveraging Hampshire's ability to be on the front foot.
That's really helpful, thanks. Steve.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Gary, for that report. The Leader mentioned in his introduction the disaggregation of the LEPs. I'd like to thank everyone who's been involved in setting up the Prosperity Board so quickly, because that's a huge amount of work done in a very short time, and that's recognised. They effectively replaced parts of the LEP, which has delivered huge investment into our area. We're on the front foot in developing the economic strategy for our area, and our area is a real powerhouse. You mentioned the 50 billion that we generate. How will the Prosperity Board work for individual sectors across our region?
Thank you, Councillor Forster. So in terms of our economic strategy, as you've mentioned, we are very much on the front foot, having seen this coming over a number of years in terms of the importance of the economy in terms of the wider public outcomes that I've referenced, but also those shifting sands of responsibility in terms of putting things like major infrastructure, economic growth, skills and development back into the hands of large democratic institutions like upper tier local authorities like our own. And so as part of being on the front foot, many Cabinet members will remember in 2023 we approved an economic strategy for our area. And so that Prosperity Board isn't going from a standing start. We have the benefit of a well-established economic strategy, and now we're in a position with, rather than starting with a blank piece of paper, we're nuancing that and developing it over the next 6 months. In terms of sectors, it's, I often describe Hampshire as very much a polycentric place of sectors. So it's not just, a single place, it's a collection of multiple places and multiple sectors. And clearly, when you apply them a sectoral lens, you've got things like maritime, which are absolutely, focused along the south coast for good and obvious reason. But then take something like defence, where there's obviously a huge amount of defence investment down in Portsmouth and the southeast of the county, but then a huge defence presence both in the northeast and the northwest of the county. You can then apply similar geographies to things like tourism, logistics, aerospace, financial services, and so on, with each of those sectors having that polycentric, unique geographical arrangement to them. So the trick within the economic strategy will not be applying a one-size-fits-all to the area of Hampshire. There'll be some things that are absolutely common across the area which we'll make reference to, but then really making sure when we dive into those individual sectors, we're reflecting those unique geographical lenses, and then also expanding that to recognise that in many of those sectors, it's not just operating within the boundaries of Hampshire, it's that wider cross-regional work as well.
Super, thanks. Any other questions or comments, everybody? No? Any debate? All happy? This is, am I right in thinking this is the last time that we have this kind of report coming to Cabinet, Gary, because it's now covered by the Partnership Board from now on?
So yeah, sadly for you and me, Cabinet, you won't be subject to this at every Cabinet report. What the paper refers to is the the operational responsibility and strategic responsibilities, I'd describe it, now shifts to our Hampshire Prosperity Board, which sits at the centre of our newly established governance arrangement. I just want to emphasise, though, that the responsibility ultimately still sits with Hampshire County Council as the upper tier local authority in terms of the accountabilities and responsibilities we've been given from central government, as well as the guardians and custodians of the money, which is both the grant money that's come across, but also those reserves that will transfer from our local enterprise partnerships. So Cabinet will still get periodic updates in terms of the output from the Prosperity Board, but not on a recurring meeting basis that you're currently used to.
So we should thank you for all of those months and of providing these reports for us. And we look forward to sort of the updates on how the Prosperity Board goes forward, which falls to us all, to Zoe and I in particular, as the members of it from the county, to do that. Are we all agreed with the recommendations from the report? Agreed, yeah. Thanks very much. So item 7 is the Hampshire Minerals and Waste partial update. We've got Melissa and Laura. Sorry, Laura. What we're going to do as well, we have Miss Perry who's come along who'd like to say a few words, and then we've also got Malcolm and Jackie who'd like to say a few words. So what we'll do, if it's okay, is let you guys present the report, then ask Miss Perry to say a few words if she'd like, and then ask the two of you to join us as well, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so.
Thank you very much, Leader and Cabinet. So you've got me introducing the report. I've got Melissa and Laura here, who have been absolutely pivotal. So Laura is our Head of Spatial Planning. Melissa is our Strategic Planning Manager. They're here to help me respond to any technical questions you may have and provide some backup to me and knowledge around that. So Cabinet will be reminded we were last here on this matter in December 2023. When Cabinet approved the version presented in that meeting for Regulation 19 consultation. And I just want to start introducing the report by way of some background. So Cabinet will be aware from both this paper and previous papers that the National Planning Policy Framework requires local plans to be reviewed and assess whether they require updating once every 5 years. The current Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan was last adopted in 2013. And produced in partnership with Portsmouth City Council, Southampton City Council, and our 2 national park authorities. An initial review of the plan was undertaken in 2018, and a further review took place in 2020. And it was that point in 2020 that we concluded that the adopted plan needed to be partially updated, following which a draft plan was prepared. That draft plan was subject to a 12-week consultation between the 8th of November 2022 and the 31st of January 2023 under what we call Regulation 18 processes. We received approximately 2,500 responses to that consultation. So those responses were then reviewed and the plan was updated, and parts of those update, as you'll see in your papers today, included strengthening consideration of things like climate change and adding relevant hooks for the emerging local nature recovery strategies, which as Cabinet will be acutely aware is a new requirement of local authorities that has come out during that period. And following that last Cabinet approval that I referred to when we were last here in December 2023, we then went out for consultation again under what's called Regulation 19 from the 9th of January to the 5th of March 2024. And that consultation received 831 responses. So in the report today, you'll therefore see the summary of the responses, as well as the detailed links to the appendices containing each individual comment, and where feedback has resulted in proposed amendments being suggested to the plan, and also updated associated documents. However, in summary, whilst minor modifications have been identified, these are points of clarification and do not ultimately change the policies and proposals within the plan. Consequently, it is considered that the partial update plan is now suitable for submission to the Planning Inspectorate for scrutiny through the public examination process. It's therefore recommended that Cabinet now recommends the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, the partial update, and associated submission documents as appendices A and B for consideration by County Council and then for submission to the Secretary of State. This supports the approvals gained by partner authorities to submit the plan in December 2023. So Cabinet will see the recommendations in paragraphs 2 and 3 of the report and welcome any questions, Leader.
Thank you very much, Gary. I think before we go to questions, shall we ask everybody to come and say their piece, and then we can make sure that our questions kind of reflect what people have said as well. Ms. Perry, would you like to say a few words? I recognise that you came unprepared, thinking that you weren't going to have the opportunity to speak. But so, as I say, take your time. Don't worry if it's not too polished. But we'd really like to hear what you have to say.
Good morning, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to say a few words. I just wish to say a few words about Ashley Manor Farm being included in this partial update. The site has been rejected twice in the past on appeal, the inspector considering each time that the open aspect was essential to the setting of New Milton. This same argument saw a site refused last year. That was up at Lee Castle Farm in Worcester. New Milton's town crest comprises a sailing boat, the forest, deer, and sheaves of corn, showing an appreciation of its setting. The sheaves of corn relate to agriculture, and Ashley Manor Farm comprises Grade 2 agricultural land, best and most versatile agricultural land. Surely a consideration in these days where food security has become ever more important. I understand it is also the case that lesser valued land should be developed first. If this goes ahead, it will lead to the industrialisation of the eastern approach to New Milton. The site is situated near the bottom of the high street. It will lead to a higher concentration of traffic at a much enlarged roundabout, with lighting leading to night skies, losing the dark sky system that we have at the moment. The site is within a mile of Barton Cliffs, subject to coastal erosion. There is a very high water table. The attenuation ponds have already been enlarged on the draft plans. Drainage into small streams eventually feed into Sturt Pond at Keyhaven, which is a nature reserve. According to readings taken at the Needles, the prevailing southwesterly winds are often amongst the strongest in the country. These will blow noise and dust over a very, very wide area. There are many other considerations, but I won't take up your time now, and thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful. What we'll do is we'll let the other councillors speak, and then we will ask a couple of questions around that for you. So, Jackie, Malcolm, would you like to both of you come up, and then we'll let you say a few words. Now, on the basis of both ladies first, but also because you're alphabetically first, Jackie, if you'd like to go first, and then
don't often come alphabetically first, actually. First of all, congratulations to all of you as cabinet members for your new appointment. I haven't been here since obviously you made the decision at the AGM, and I look forward to working with you constructively over the next year or so. I'm seeking to represent my division and my division's residents, but also children, as you know, for the best outcomes we can achieve for the county. So the Minerals and Waste Plan, really, this is my conversation here, is about the environment, and I'm conscious that Councillor Wallace's may well be about a similar thing. But I think that I'm going to just start with a couple of sentences from one of our own my own parish councils. We have an oil well in our parish. The UK Town and Country Planning Act implemented states that development consent for public and private projects which are likely to have significant effects on the environment should be granted only after an assessment of the likely significant environmental effects of those projects carried out. Now, recently, there was a case which went for an oil well extraction in Surrey, where the words significant environmental effects of those projects was limited to the effects and activities actually on the project site. But actually, the question was, should it be extended to the crude oil extraction and the impact of that crude extraction on the environment as a whole? So the High Court and Appeal Court ruled that only the environmental effects at the project site would be relevant. But at the Supreme Court on 20th of June 2024, even though the project ultimately burnt would not be the same as the crude oil produced from the well site, this wasn't enough to break the chain. So that Supreme Court decision overruled. So I'm really pleased that in our minerals and waste plan, and actually I probably need to declare an interest here because I'm involved in planning at Winchester City Council, so I'm sorry, I've just realised that. And I do declare that interest, but it's non-prejudicial here. But in this case, we are saying, and people put forward in the Reg 19, the Reg 18 responses, that they want to see some offsetting against oil and gas policy. And I think that the paper gives a nod towards that and agrees that that in principle could be looked at. I think this Supreme Court decision possibly makes that now a stronger statement, and I will be making that response to Regulation 19. And that's the first thing. The second one is that you've looked at the principle of safeguarding sites, but still Policy 29 doesn't accept that no new sites have been allocated for waste. It says they continue to come forward, and this seems to work quite well. I would challenge that statement. I don't think it does necessarily work quite well. If Hampshire wants to ensure the waste storage and management to receive public support, and I think that councillors around this table have been involved in standing up for their own divisions as well as myself. If we want to seek a better planning of new waste sites as the sector becomes more sophisticated in what it receives and what it manages over the period of this plan, we need to be thinking about allocating sites that are practical. Any new site can actually start something new in that area, but once it becomes a waste site, currently it's a safeguarded site for waste forevermore. We could be literally making our whole county a waste site by 2090. As we recycle more construction waste, the impact of dust and pollution increases. We know from our work on air quality, PM 2.5 and PM 10 are known to travel far and wide and have a regional effect, not just a local effect. And we don't want to make that air quality by these works. So just as the Supreme Court have made a statement about the impact of crude oil on the site, there is a case of thinking about the air quality and way in which we can manage that. Again, there is something in the plan that makes it clear that air quality is a consideration, but it doesn't really follow through of how far away that air quality has to be affected and improved. So there should be, I believe, active measures to contain these particles as far as we're able to. So for this reason, I'm really disappointed that the principle of major recycling centres has not been restricted to agreed sites. Sites which should be, for instance, at major road hubs and not in rural farms. I hadn't known what Mrs. Perry was going to talk about, but I think the point she makes is very real. Rural farms are cheap to choose as a recycling site. They have good yard space. They look ideal from a waste point of view. But from a management point of view, they aren't really constructive in our way of thinking about our quality of the environment for everybody in Hampshire. I think it's often been said that our recycling sites are the quarries of tomorrow. The quarries that we have now, I think you have one in your area, are taking less and less, and the recycling sites are producing more and more. And if that's the case, we need to be very careful about the quality of the environment that we are left with, not just on the ground, but in the air as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Really pertinent points. We'll come back to them just in a minute. Malcolm, did you want to make your contribution, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was actually going to echo some of the point, talk a bit more about the first point that Councillor Porter raised. Obviously, we're quite late in this this point now in the mineral waste programme, so it is getting on. But the recent Supreme Court ruling is really important and does affect our plan going forward. Anyone interested in the future of our planet is aware of the impact of burning fossil fuels, chiefly oil, coal and gas. When fossil fuels are burnt, they release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, so called because they act like a greenhouse in the Earth's atmosphere, trapping the sun's heat and causing global surface temperatures to rise. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, close to 90% of global carbon dioxide emissions stem from burning fossil fuels. The whole purpose of extracting fossil fuels is to make hydrocarbons available for combustion. It can therefore be said with virtual certainty that once oil has been extracted from the ground, the carbon contained within it will sooner or later be released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, and so will continue to contribute to global warming. Before a developer is allowed to proceed with a project which is likely to have significant effects on the environment, legislation in the UK and many other countries requires an environmental impact assessment to be carried out. The object of that assessment is to ensure that the environmental impact of a project is exposed to public debate and considered in the decision-making process. The legislation does not prevent the competent authority from giving development consent for projects which will cause significant harm to the environment, but it aims to ensure that if such consent is given, it is given with full knowledge of the environmental cost. Just over 2 weeks ago, on the 20th of June, the Supreme Court handed down a groundbreaking judgment in the case of Finch versus Surrey County Council, that the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive requires a planning authority to assess the downstream greenhouse gas emissions of a fossil fuel extraction project before deciding whether to grant planning permission. In other words, planning must take into account not only the direct environmental impact of the oil and gas production site, but also the environmental impact of burning the fossil fuels that are produced at that site. In their judgment, the Supreme Court was clear that in order for the process to have the necessary democratic legitimacy, the public must be able to participate in environmental decision-making and be informed of the environmental impacts of a proposed development so that they can comment on them before a decision is made to grant planning permission. This means that planning authorities are now required to address the fact that fossil fuel extraction will inevitably lead to an increase in global warming, which will only serve to exacerbate the climate emergency and put us all in even greater danger before deciding whether to grant planning permission for such a project. This is a significant change to how environmental impact assessments had been performed in the past and therefore will require changes to the Minerals and Waste Plan. Please will the Council advise how they plan to address this issue given the late stage of where we're at in the process? Thank you.
Thanks very much. We've got, I think a couple of my colleagues have already got some questions as well, but what I'm also going to ask the team to do is to address your questions and also address the points that Ms. Perry made as well, if they can, as part of that. Shall we start with the issue of Ashley Manor Farm, in the respect that obviously we've heard what the concerns that Ms. Perry raised. I think it's interesting that we still have it in our plan even though it's had appeal decisions that have turned down any proposal for the development there, and that's similarly we've had the recent case of Hamble Airfield as well. I think it would be perhaps useful to explain to everybody, if you wouldn't mind, where we go with these, because why are they still there if planning inspector is already saying no to them, and or we've said no through our regulatory process? Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Yes, I can answer that question. So when we've looked at allocated sites which are subject to current planning applications, we have looked at the issues that have been arising through that, and obviously with Hamble with the refusal, looked very carefully at the reasons for refusal to understand if they are issues with the planning application or the scheme that's been put forward by the applicant, or whether they go to the heart of the allocation and therefore challenge the principle of the development. And in looking, so we've got 3 sites that have planning applications that are ongoing or have been refused, and we've looked very carefully at all of those, and we believe that the allocations are still sound from a principle point of view, and that a lot of the issues that have been raised could be overcome by an alternative scheme. And so those have been captured in the development considerations where appropriate, so that if future applications come forward under the new plan, that they need to be addressed by any planning application that's submitted.
Super, that's helpful, thanks. In the case that you've got additional, so you're identifying that there might be reasons, or there might be ways by which the previous reasons for refusal could be overcome. Is there a point at which, as a point of principle, whilst you might be able to overcome those, it becomes uneconomic for the applicant still to bring the site forward? Does it still stay in the plan if that's the case?
Yeah, obviously viability does come into it, but the sites have been put forward by operators. And so at the moment we have no reason to think that they wouldn't come forward. And I think the applicants also understand that the issues that have been raised, and we know that, for instance, Hamble is likely to be appealed or a new application submitted. So we appreciate that the applicant in that case thinks that they could overcome those issues. And so, that's why they are still in the plan.
Understood, thanks. So turning to the Supreme Court, I think, Zoe, you wanted to ask a question around that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really just to expand, both of you obviously referenced the Supreme Court on the 20th of June. And Councillor Porter, you also referenced that clearly we have listened to some of the consultation responses of offsetting and air quality. I suppose my question to sort of maybe wrap that up is, do we need to review the oil and gas policy within this submission?
Thank you. We have been following the case of Finch versus Surrey County Council very closely because obviously it's relevant to ourselves. And so that's why in the previous version of the plan, we actually made reference already to downstream effects in the first paragraph of implementation text after the policy itself. So currently the policy is compliant. We are going to be looking at that wording very carefully to see whether that itself needs some maybe minor modifications to tighten it up in light of the recent decision. But at the moment it's compliant and the policy still stands. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Jackie's second point around waste sites. I think could you make a few comments around that for us?
Certainly. So some sites for waste uses were proposed as part of the plan making process. All of those were reviewed very carefully. Some have since received planning permission. Others, as I say, went through the review process, and through those various stages, the decision was taken to not take any of those forward, either because they were unsuitable, they were either given permission, or weren't suitable for actual allocation because they're existing sites already, and we're looking at potential extensions of an existing site. So we don't actually have any sites to include as potential allocations. However, we have got evidence to suggest that suitable capacity comes through the plan process using a criteria-based policy. And a huge amount of work has gone into tightening up and ensuring that Policy 29, which sets out the locational criteria, is really fit for purpose and has really learnt from all previous decisions that have been made on sites to make sure it's tightened up and we get the right sites coming forward. So we're very confident in the use of Policy 29 and it bringing the right sort of sites forward. But as you all should note that that's not looked at in isolation. When we have an application comes in, all policies within the plan need to be looked at. So transport, environment, all sorts of issues are taken into account, as well as Policy 29, to point us in the right direction.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I think, I mean, one of the other issues that I find interesting is, as Jackie said, you know, there's a thought that the waste sites are potentially the quarries of the future. And you're right, I've got quite a number of different sites in my division. But funnily enough, also, the quarries that we have are also taking in some of the non-recyclable waste to backfill what's happening. Interestingly, when I chair liaison panels, they're talking about the fact that they're finding it difficult to find the waste to backfill it because of the improvements in recycling, which I guess also has an impact on what we need to look for going forward. Does it? Oh.
We've carefully looked at the waste figures and sort of forecast what we might need in the future, and that's taken into account all types of waste, including construction, demolition and excavation waste. And we're also drafted our policies to try and strengthen the amount of recycling that does take place, but equally making sure what waste is left over, whether we've got suitable operations to be able to deal with those. And some of that, as you say, will include the infill material for some of these sites. So all of that's been built into our forecasts.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Obviously, we don't want to make a debate, but are you both okay with the question we've got? Colleagues, any other comments or questions that we have? Lulu?
Thank you. Interesting report as always, and I've heard it in its process of being developed, so delighted to see it today. In view of what happened last week, I'm just wondering how future-proofed we're going to be, because obviously there's a lot of legislation coming through, there's a new government and a new focus. How soon would we have to review it and perhaps amend it slightly? Is there a 2-year break clause, for example, or I'll hand it over.
So the 5-year need to review the plan still stays in the National Planning Policy Framework. We are very aware that there is a start of a review of the planning process, and we've very much embedded that and following it through and what that means for the plan going forward. This is an old style plan. We know that plans in the future will look quite different. We've also been looking at what each of the government parties were saying going forward. The figures within the plan at the moment in terms of provision look historically and see what's happened in the past, but also looks at what forecasts are available for economy, construction, all that sort of thing, and have looked at those going forward. We are in a tricky time in terms of knowing the future, and we've been like that for the last few years, which is why we've built in a sort of monitoring tool within the policies, both for minerals and for waste, which will allow us to respond a little bit more quickly in terms of any sort of changes in demand. So we have taken that into account, and we've built in a more flexible and future-proof plan.
Really helpful, thank you. We'll wait and see what happens later today. Apparently we'll know a bit more. Hampshire only has a very small bit of greenbelt around New Milton, funnily enough, but I'm not sure that their definition of greenbelt just means greenbelt. I suspect it means green fields. So we will see. Any other comments, everybody? No. So what we're doing with the report is asking, or we're asked to confirm that we're happy with it and that we pass it on to council for their deliberation next week. Happy with that? Great. Thank you very much. Thank Ms. Perry. Thank you very much for your contribution, and Jackie and Malcolm as well. And thanks very much, team, for helping us with that. So item number 8 is the annual corporate performance and productivity assurance report from Jack and Steph.
Morning, Chairman, Cabinet. So this is the first of our new corporate performance assurance framework and productivity reports, and it does look and feel quite differently to those which have previously come to Cabinet. So the report provides an annual record of where assurances have been provided to members regarding the Council's performance in delivering the Serving Hampshire Strategic Plan priorities, as well as broader organisational performance. By way of reminder, the new report is not intended to report on or explain performance related to individual agreed measures across the council. Rather, it's intended to be assurance for you that performance has been reported, scrutinised and overseen through appropriate governance arrangements throughout the year. The report also includes the new requirement for a productivity plan with a focus which was determined by government around transformation, technology, waste, by which it means efficiency, and barriers to improvements. I'm going to hand over to Steph just to give you the highlights.
Thank you, Jack. Good morning, everyone. I'm just intending to talk through a little bit about the content of the report, just to outline the main performance sources or sources of assurance. So within Appendix 1, which is the main performance report, there are 4 main sections. The first section is intended to provide assurance around the wide range of reports that have been produced through the last 12 months or so in relation to the Serving Hampshire Strategic Plan. So very much it sets out the numerous assurance reports to each of those 4 strategic outcomes for the plan. And these are all reports that have been considered by members throughout the last year and which detail council activity in support of our strategic priorities. They include both regular annual reports, but also some individual programme reports where they're relevant to delivering a specific project, programme or priority. Section 2, for the first time, includes more information in relation to our key themes of staff or workforce, finance and governance. So there's a whole range of reports you will particularly see in relation to our medium-term financial strategy in that space. It does also include some external audit assurance reports, including the Value for Money report, which the most recent of which gives us that independent assurance regarding our organisation's performance as a sound organisation, albeit recognising operating within the financial pressures of the sector. The third section focuses on a small basket of corporate performance measures, which we consider to be of particular relevance and importance. So you'll recall that in previous reports, performance reports, we didn't actually include those performance measures in their specific detail. So for this time, focusing on the areas of most importance, we're seeking to improve transparency in terms of including those around those particular measures that we think are of significance to residents and members. And then section 4 of the report outlines some broader independent key inspection results for some of our important statutory services that obviously support our most vulnerable residents. The performance assurance framework also includes the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Determinations report. For the first time, that isn't included within the main report that you see today, but it's a separate report of the monitoring officer that's on the agenda. And also we make reference to the performance information that's published on the Office for Local Government website, which provides residents and other interested parties the data for local authorities against a defined set of criteria. And those measures that are contained within that publication are outlined in paragraph 12 of Appendix 1. In terms of the productivity plan, just a couple of bits I wanted to note for you in particular. So the latest information we have confirms that we still need to be submitting the plan to government by the 19th of July. So that is our intention. And beyond the 4 themes of the plan, which Jack has touched on, just to note, there are no specific requirements around the format or how we present the plan. It's not prescribed by government. So we have based our approach looking at the fact that these themes are already of key importance to the County Council. So we've taken a very similar approach to the broader performance assurance report by linking the existing reports that tell the story of what we've done and we continue to do to ensure our organisation's productivity in the face of the significant financial challenges we have. And really, for us, our medium-term financial strategy over the past and future years is our key anchor for all of the work that we report in this space. In future years, we're anticipating we'll integrate these themes into the productivity, from the productivity plan into our broader assurance reporting, so we're absolutely seamless in terms of our presentation. That's it, thanks.
Thank you very much. There's an enormous amount of stuff in here, and it's to your credit that you've pulled it all together. So thank you, both of you, very much. And it's let's hope that it's of use to the government, because there is a burden on us in having to keep on providing all of this information. We want to be assured ourselves of what's happening, but equally, sometimes one wonders whether we end up having to over-assure other people as well as ourselves as to what we're doing, because we know we're doing a great job. So, Zoe.
Yeah, just to really expand on that, and I fully echo those comments. It's a really large report with a lot in it, and you talk about reassurance and corporate reassurance, and then you talk about obviously how those broader assurance reports filter down in committees, and I know these were both presented at recent committees as well. I suppose my question is appreciating that some of it, especially the productivity plan, is a framework led from the government, but obviously the performance is slightly different. It's a framework that we've adopted. Can you explain in more detail and in support of us as corporate sort of scrutiny of how we can have that reassurance on organisation performance? You talked about metrics, for example, and those assurance reports coming down to committee. So I suppose what I'm looking for is how does it support that strategic scrutiny that we're looking at?
I'll start, Jack may add to that. Okay, so I think in the past we've taken a very subjective or narrative-based approach to reporting our performance, which could be quite fragmented in nature. It very much would just pick out some examples. The intention of the performance assurance framework that we presented to you actually this time last year was the recognition of that, and there's such a wealth of information that we produce as an organisation already for various means, but actually in itself very much speaks to the strength of the performance of the organisation. So this is about a more holistic framework that takes account of all of those sources of information and assurance that is provided to members and is scrutinised by members throughout the year. And it focuses very much on those particular themes that we talk about and are as important, and our residents ask us about as well. It also seeks to align those to the strategic priorities of the organisation. So we have our 4-year Serving Hampshire strategic plan, and so it's important for us that we can speak to those individual priorities, and also around some of the most significant areas that we might be inspected on around, for example, our children's homes, our adult social care performance, etc. So it links very much to existing sources that independently are assuring our performance as well. We've tried to be as transparent as we can also. As I said previously, we didn't incorporate the performance measures within the body of the report. With the approach we're taking, we very much want to signpost to the information that we feel is most relevant to residents and that they are interested in, but also recognising what we don't want to do is create an industry. And, right now we've got to be as efficient as possible in terms of our presentation and avoid duplication of effort. So what we're not trying to do is repeat all of the good work that's happening already across the organisation, simply provide a view of what that looks like. Jack, did you want to anything?
Only one tiny point that springs to mind, just around, where is the best place for performance to be scrutinised, and that is largely within the relevant scrutiny committees associated with our particular areas of outcome and output, adults and children's, etc., which is what this report is trying not to take away from, that the scrutiny happens in the right places. And all we're doing here is assuring that that scrutiny has happened as it should.
That's helpful, thanks. Kirsty.
Thank you very much, Leader. Jack, Steph, thanks for this. The heavens have opened, I think. Yeah. How does the report deliver what the government have asked for, and how will it help us maintain focus on productivity in the current financial climate? I was pleased that you said that the new government have still asked for the plans to be submitted later this month. Have you had any indication of how they will utilise the plans?
Thank you. I'll answer your first question, then I'll come back to the ask from new government. So I think it's fair to say our organisation has an ongoing strong focus on driving out efficiency savings, have done for a number of years now, and focusing on what's most important in terms of what we need to deliver. So we've been fortunately in quite a strong position to be able to pull together our productivity plan in terms of what we have included. We haven't felt the need to kind of go away and start from a blank sheet of paper, so to speak. We have a lot of information through all of the work we've done through our various transformation and savings programs since 2010 and probably before then, actually. So this really is just about us continuing to demonstrate that productivity in the context of our current savings programme to 2025 and the various other avenues that we're obviously looking at in terms of trying to continue to meet the financial challenges we face. A specific question that government had asked us in the productivity plans, I just wanted to mention this, related to barriers which government could lift to support the sector in being more productive. And what we felt was important is we wanted to speak to colleagues across the local government networks that we have to understand how they were approaching this. So when we were developing our plan, we also were coordinating with the Society of County Treasurers, the County Council Network, and also a body of local authorities known as South East 7, just to ensure that we were aligned in terms of some of the messaging that we were giving about those particular barriers. So we had a collective voice in our ask to government to help support our organisation and the rest of local government in those financial challenges when we're looking at this space. So just to mention that as well. In terms of the ask from the new government, we actually haven't had any instruction that's different from what we had before. So when I say we, as far as we're aware, we're still required to submit it, that's because we haven't heard any differently. It's my expectation, if I were to go with what the previous government had said and how they would use the information, it's very much about sharing good practice and signposting to other opportunities, what are other local authorities doing in this space, and to give a flavour into government around some of the particular challenges that we're facing and how we're approaching it. It wasn't intended to be a benchmarking exercise as such. And so whilst every local authority will submit the plan and we will all publish them on our websites, as we will through the Cabinet report, there wasn't any expectation government were necessarily going to then bring together the key bits from each one and then publish some kind of report. We'll have to see what the new government want to do. So we're waiting in anticipation.
There was some, so, I mean, we're all in the really early days of a new government, so we're kind of guessing a bit, but there was some suggestion that Oflog might use some of this information to begin to kind of flag if they needed to intervene with people. Have you got any sense of whether they're still going to do that, or?
Not really. So the reporting for Oflog, are you talking about the separate reporting that we've been doing now for the last year or so? So there is obviously with us all reporting against particular performance metrics, there is the ability for government to be able to use that data more specifically, I think, because it speaks to particular measures and to identify whether or not there were areas within local government that they needed to focus in on. And the expectation was that the Office of Local Government, although there are a number they're already asking us to report on, would seek to add to those performance measures over time. But we don't know what that might look like, to be honest. It's quite narrow in terms of the focus currently as to what they are looking at.
Yeah, just to add in a statement of the obvious to some extent. So whilst the past government have been clear about their intentions around the productivity plan and how they use it, obviously once the data is published, what we don't know is how any other people who look at those reports might use that data. And there's no intention for league tables, for example, from a government perspective, but we don't know how the data will be reported and used going forward. So that's one that we'll obviously be paying attention to.
Yeah, thanks. There's an inevitability about people creating league tables, even if the government and we don't want them to. So, any other comments, colleagues? No, thank you for putting all of that together, guys. That's really, really helpful. And we're all agreed on the on the report. Happy with that? Yeah. Good. Thank you so much. So, on item 9 is Ombudsman Complaints Report, which is David. Yeah, sorry, it's gone. I was looking confused because it said it was Jack, and I thought, oh, she's running away quickly, but no. David's more than capable, I'm sure to say.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a change of approach. We have a standalone report about the Ombudsman. As Steph said, it used to be incorporated into our overall performance report. I think it's designed to give it a bit more prominence and discussion. And I have a duty as the monitoring officer to report to the authority, and that's for the purpose of this paper. You can see in terms of trends, we had the same number of determinations this year as we had in the previous year. One positive trend is that the degree of financial redress has been decreasing as a pattern from 41,840 in 21-22 to 23,550 in the last year. We have tried to get the best comparisons we can with other comparable authorities. When we discussed this at the Select Committee, there was a good discussion. Councillor Philpott pointed out that they weren't exactly the same as us, these authorities, but they're the best comparators that we have. So in terms of those comparisons, we are having fewer determinations against us than our other relevant authorities. So you'll see also that the majority of complaints are around children's services and SEN. I think we have to see that in the context of the activity in that area, the pressure in that area, etc. So we, as I said, we had a good discussion at the Select Committee about this. I think the Select Committee agreed an additional resolution that noted the council's strong performance in this area, like the relatively low level of complaints relative to the scale of our activity. So that's pretty much all I have to say in the presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Super, thank you. Now, Jackie, you wanted to make a contribution to this one as well.
Thank you, and I appreciate that it looks like a really good news story because it's less of a financial burden on the county council, but the number of complaints that have continued is steady, which is good because I remember the time when it was 52, so it is much better than it used to be. But the degree of financial redress for residents has gone down. So the degree of disagreement continues, but the benefit to the public decreases. The public can go public, and I've seen one in the Chronicle this last week about someone's extreme dissatisfaction. And I appreciate that the Ombudsman has a job to do and does it as fairly as he can or she can. And I appreciate that not everybody gets the result that they want to see. But I do see this as the very tip of the iceberg. We know how many people struggle with the process of EHCPs and SEN. And I can't tell you how many times people say, it's only when I threatened a lawyer does something seem to happen. So I do accept that this paper is a steadying of the ship, but I still see that it does feel a concern that we realise how many people are seeking special needs assessments and EHCPs, and we still haven't got it right in the speed and the respect with which we give people when we do those assessments.
Okay, thanks for that contribution. David, I don't know whether you wish to make any comment on that, or it's sort of more of a statement than a question, I guess. But
I suppose it's how can we improve still further, knowing the constraints on our budgets, how can we improve still further that response to the HCP process?
I think,
and the risk of NHS.
To be fair to David, I think that's probably not really his area of expertise. But I mean, it's certainly something that I would suggest that perhaps it might be something that you might wish to talk to Juliet about in terms of something that you can look at through the Children and Young People's Select Committee, because that's clearly it is. I don't wish to diminish what you've said, Jackie. It's an issue, but it's not. We're talking about the detail of the outcome report here, which is something for the monitoring officer.
And if I suppose that's why I just said at the beginning that I agree that we've steadied the ship, but the degree of financial redress has dropped, but the number of complaints is upheld, so the degree of disagreement and the benefit to the public decreases.
Yep, understood. Thanks. Colleagues, any other? Liz.
Thank you. In fact, actually, David, I'm not terribly sure you can answer this either. I was going to ask what we can do to reduce the complaints regarding SEN. I mean, most parents, well, all parents want the best for their children, but actually if you've got children with disabilities or educational needs, you actually almost feel you're fighting a battle with us. And it would be much, much better if, say, from year naught, and I'm really pleased to say that the SEN sufficiency strategy is looking at children from year naught, so that we work in partnership with parents right from the start and try and get through to them what is possible, because we can never do everything that a parent of a child with disability wants, but we do know what we can do to help and work with them to achieve that. And again, but I think that's a question not for you. Oh, it is.
Answer to an extent.
Yeah. Okay.
So we had quite a good discussion again at the Select Committee about the actions that both children's and adults are taking. Both have a review process that every time there is one of these determinations, they take it away, they look at it in detail, they see what they see they can do better. So it's absolutely a learning experience every time we get a determination. In terms of children's services, they are focusing on a sort of strength-based approach with parents. So they make contact at an early stage, they try and talk to the parents, they try and resolve the situation as early as they can. And that's an approach they've taken in other parts of their services, which has been quite successful in reducing complaints. So it's absolutely not just a case of we get these things and put them in a dusty drawer. Each one is taken very seriously, reviewed, and as we do our best to learn lessons from it and make the service better.
Super, thanks. I think it is striking how whenever you speak to any parent in this situation, they talk about it in terms of a conflict. They use the language of conflict around it, and it's good to hear that we're doing everything we can to decrease that, because that shouldn't be the case as much as possible. But I mean, it's certainly something I'd encourage you to bring to Juliet and to look at through the Children and Young People's Committee. Steve.
Thank you, Leader. And yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Councillor Porter, you sit on many of the committees and have raised some of the issues. And I think you're well aware that under current legislation, the number of EHCPs, education, health and care plans that we have has risen significantly. The number of queries about special needs has risen significantly, and our timeline has reduced dramatically, despite the huge rise in the number of those plans, etc. So seeing that there are fair judgments and that the number of upheld ombudsman complaints has reduced, I think is validation of the fact that we are doing a really good job. We always put the children first. That is part of our culture. And I think that's evidenced in what we do. But we are we are held back in some instances by legislation. And I think your comment that it's only when I threaten legal action, well, that is a standard comment that many people make, which is unfounded. And actually, we take every single complaint that comes in seriously. We do investigate them, we do pursue them. And the fact that we do it fairly, and there are so many upheld complaints, I think shows that we are doing a fantastic job. But I'd urge you to work with me, to work with colleagues and our officers, because our intent would be to reduce that to zero. Part of what we'd need to achieve that would probably be some legislative change, because legislation, I'm afraid, restricts us in terms of what we'd like to do.
Ros, would you like to say something?
Thank you. I just feel it's quite important to just put into context the amount of EHCPs we actually do have in Hampshire. The figure that I had only last week was over 16,000 young people on educational health plans within Hampshire. And that is a huge number. And I echo the comments that my colleague has just made, that we want to absolutely get it right for those children in Hampshire. And for the vast majority, we absolutely do. And I think that's echoed in the numbers of children that we do have on EHCPs and that are happy with their EHCPs. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Any other comments, everybody? David, thank you. We're asked to just note the recommendations, and also our recommendation is to note the comments in the report. Note the report. All happy with that? Yeah. Great. Thanks very much. So we're on to health and social care system resilience. So Jackie, stay there if you want to, because you're okay. Now, Graham, you thought you got away with this, but you haven't. This is going to be Graham's last cabinet meeting, so before he starts presenting the report, I wondered whether Liz and... Well, do you want to say something now? Or there's going to be an opportunity in next week as well, but I think we should just mark the occasion of your last cabinet meeting with a couple of words of thanks.
Thanks for the warning.
I did send you an email because I'd forgotten to tell you earlier, but
yeah, it's payback. It's payback, is it?
Yeah, it's payback for the other day.
Graham, I'm really disappointed you're going. I'm quite sure you're going to get very bored when you're not here. But in the 9 years you've been here, you've really taken adult services. I mean, I actually think our reputation outside Hampshire is not recognised within Hampshire for adult services, and that is in no small part down to your leadership and what you've done within the department. I'm not going to say any more because I'm saving it for the next time.
Can I just add? Graham, I haven't known you as long as Liz, but you've always been a voice of pragmatic calm. So when there's been difficult decisions at HASC, for example, you've led members through in a very organised, helpful way. So thank you for that. But there's one bit of work that I realise you are heavily involved in, and perhaps not everybody does, is our liaison and integration with the NHS, because that's not necessarily seen in some of our committee meetings. But you've done a huge amount of work with the step up, step down care, and that's really brought Hampshire forward in many ways. So just thank you for all your work liaising between those two authorities, the NHS and the County Council. Thank you.
So Graham, so begins the long list of events to say goodbye to you. But would you like to tell us about the health and social care system resilience, please?
Thank you, and thank you for making me squirm as I attempt to do this. So thank you very much indeed. So this is the annual update, and it's part of our overall corporate governance across the County Council, and hopefully the report demonstrates work that we've undertaken in the last financial year with regard to supporting Hampshire residents to be appropriately supported following an acute hospital admission. It also points to work that's continuing in this year. Leader, I'd firstly like to say thank you for your opening comments in recognising the efforts of many colleagues working across the health and care system to support residents. I often say this, and it's a little bit of a trope, but I'm going to say it again. What we do is a genuine team effort. It does require lots of individuals across a number of different disciplines to work together in a range of different settings. So it is a culmination of a great deal of effort. And indeed, 2 weeks or so ago, we had a HASC meeting, and in that HASC meeting, it was a one-item meeting in effect. It was around hospital discharge systems. So we had colleagues from both the NHS organisations and ourselves providing a presentation and overview to HASC, and that in-depth session took some 2.5 hours. So it's something that is taken very seriously within the Health and Adult Social Care Select Committee. It's of extreme interest, of course, to members and residents in general. I would like to ask Cabinet to endorse the recommendations in section 2 of the report, but I'd just like to say a few words with regard to performance over the course of the last financial year. You'll see it detailed in paragraph 18. And what we've been able to do is to maintain high performance, positive performance, although the overall resource available to us, it's been funded through NHS financial support over a number of years now post the pandemic and a resetting of expectations. But services are incredibly busy. And again, I say this each and every time when I talk about hospital discharge, but indeed across many of our services. Demand simply continues to increase. And staff have done really quite a remarkable job to maintain performance whilst the amount of resource available, financial resource, has decreased over the last 2 years and into this year as well. But we have been able to continue to improve efficiency and optimise our services as we've been going along. But it is really tough day in, day out for staff, and we are very mindful of the impacts on residents and indeed their families in terms of making sure we get this right. And very positively, we get this right in the vast majority of cases. More than happy to take any questions, but I'll pause there. Thank you.
Super, thanks very much. Well, let's ask Jackie to give her contribution, and then we can ask you both to respond to that and any other questions that we have.
Thank you. I'm just going to make him squirm a little bit more, because that's partly why I asked to speak to this one, because I just want to say a thank you to Graham. Each email is handled efficiently and personally, each time a fair outcome. And the fact that we now have a strong transition from childhood to adulthood, even with a cabinet member, I think is testament to you as well. That has made so much difference. I've been here longer than you, and I know how much difference that has made. And your work to get people home and to get people's lives back on track has been outstanding. So even as opposition, I will say you've been blinking good. No, seriously, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I realise I find the word no criteria to reside even more horrible than bed blocker. I find it absolutely horrific to think that someone could be lying in a bed in hospital, feeling rough, having been very poorly, and be told they've got no criteria to reside here. But I understand, and I've read the paper and the presentation that you made last week, and the efforts that Hampshire are making to deal with that enormous change, which has brought poorlier people into Hampshire's bailiwick, really. I don't want to forget either other ways in which we've supported vulnerable residents. The impact of the NHS changes have perhaps been less obvious, but in adults with learning difficulties, the extra care we provide and the care experienced young people, perhaps not necessarily physical health, but mental health as well. And the challenges we have are in our own budget to deliver those aspirations. I note the holdover of significant amounts of spend from 23-24 to 24-25, and how we actually have the time to be able to stop and think and deliver those, knowing how hard you're working dealing with the social care day to day for these poor people who are labelled no criteria to reside. And I do hope we can get that definition changed, because I think it's pretty horrible. But just to say, I'm sure we'll be having lots more conversations about this, but thank you, Graham, for your work. It's really been appreciated by all parties. Thank you.
Super. Thanks very much. So, colleagues, any questions of Graham? Ros?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Graham, for your report, and also thank you for all the work that you have done over the past 9 years. We wouldn't be in the position that we are in without you and your team. I note that and this has been touched on in your delivery of this, and Councillor Porter's just mentioned it as well. I see obviously in paragraph 18 that we reference to the reduced levels of funding to support hospital discharge and service last year compared with previous years. But overall, the numbers of people being supported have remained much the same. I take it this is correct, and how has this been achieved, please?
Yeah, thank you. And all members will be aware that one of our core values as an organisation is continuous improvement. And I think this is a great example of continuous improvement. So at no point do we or can we rest on our laurels. We need to keep looking at how we can create efficiencies and optimise our services. Just by way of history, and I'll be really brief, I've been doing these reports now since 2018 in terms of what's happening across our acute hospital systems and our part in supporting residents, not patients, residents, to return safely home. So most of my career has been dogged with the term bed blocker. I agree. I don't like no criteria to reside any more than I do bed blocker, but I put those two terms together. We're talking about people. Just in terms of what's happened over the course of the last few years. So in 2022-23, we had some 31 million of available funding to support people to be safely discharged from hospital. As the report details in 23-24, that's reduced to 28.5 million. In this year, it's just under 22 million that we're expecting to see. Now, all of this is a decreasing amount of financial resource coming from the ICBs, the NHS, to us, whilst the cost of services continues to go up. Hence my earlier reference to continuous improvement. So in the spring of last year, 2023, we commissioned a very in-depth diagnostic piece of work to say, what might we do differently to get greater and greater efficiencies and better outcomes out of the services that we are providing on behalf of the whole system. What we've seen as a result of that piece of diagnostic work is a 33% improvement in length of stay in our discharge to assess, our bedded services. And we've got 4 units around the county run by HCC's care and support services that support people from an acute hospital bed through a period of recovery and active assessment, hopefully to then return safely home with a maximum amount of independence. We've seen a 33% reduction in their length of stay. Now, that doesn't mean we're pushing people through faster and faster and the outcomes reduce. What we're doing is we're being much more focused. The support they're receiving whilst in those bedded units is much more active. The one thing that we're currently missing out on is we're unable to directly employ physiotherapists. We struggled at times to get physiotherapy in reach into those units, and that's a kind of rate limiting factor for further improvement right now. But that's something that we'll continue to explore as we go forward. Alongside that, we've seen continued improvements in outcomes for people progressing through our reablement services. So some 82% of people that go through our reablement services return home or back to where they were living before being admitted to hospital with no additional support. They've recovered through that active support. So all of these things have been achieved and optimising the use of resource while the overall envelope of financial resources continue to diminish. And that again goes to my earlier comment. This is a team effort. This is not about me. This is about all of our hundreds and hundreds of staff across those specific services that are providing that support to residents 24/7. We're a 7-day service and we're pretty much round the clock. And this is really important. So thank you.
May I ask another one, just leading on from that? So, thank you for that really in-depth answer. So, you mentioned about, obviously, this is very much, we've talked about the diminishing funding, and you've mentioned about the physiotherapists as well. So, going forward, are there any changes and challenges in the rest of this financial year that you want to draw to our attention as the Cabinet today?
Yeah, thank you. We used to talk about winter pressures, and one would imagine now that we're in summer, in theory at least, that some of those pressures would reduce. They certainly don't. They're year-round pressures now. And I've said this probably on each occasion that I've presented this annual report. Actually, one of the biggest pressures on the system is the August bank holiday period. The reason being, of course, the schools are out, lots of staff working in health and care are taking holidays with families. So August is as pressured as Christmas and New Year. We see that all year round. I think the thing that I would be pointing to, certainly at this point for me, as I'm about to exit stage left, is as we go into the autumn and winter, we have seen again another significant step down in the NHS financial support into these services. So we've recently gone from around about 160 bed-based discharge to assess places across the county through HCC Care. We're now at 120. We've seen further reductions in what's known as rapid support services. So those services that rather than seeing somebody admitted to an acute hospital bed can turn somebody around really very quickly at the emergency department and hopefully return them safely with support without needing to be admitted, because what we know is once people are admitted into hospital, the chances are they'll start to decompensate in terms of their muscle mass, their ability to mobilise. So actually getting people out of hospital is really important. But those services too have just taken a step down in terms of the overall envelope of resource that we've got. Going into winter, my comment would be those services will not be sufficient to see health and care getting safely through what will be an incredibly busy autumn-winter period. I think alongside that, what we're also seeing is unrelenting demand. So this is a comment, it's not a criticism. We are seeing unrelenting demand on our acute hospital systems. Something, as I said earlier, that HASC had the opportunity to probe in great depth a couple of weeks ago. What we're seeing through our services as a consequence of that demand pressure is the number of people requiring our support at the point of discharge is going up. And it's important to understand that we try to categorise people. So in terms of the level of support they might need, people who require no support are known as pathway 0. They go home with a letter for their GP, they might leave with some medications, but that's it. What we're seeing now are a greater number of people, particularly older, frailer people, needing to have much higher levels of support. So in most previous years, in most systems, we would expect up to 85% of people to leave hospital with no additional support through our services. We're now seeing in some cases, at some points, only 70% of people leaving with no onward support required. So what that's doing is, as services are diminishing, we've optimised as much as we possibly can, but the demand is getting greater and greater. And also the resource has stepped down. So those would be my comments, and those are my fears as we go into, in due course, autumn and winter. The system will be absolutely creaking. And there are, in all inevitability, there will be probably some further reductions in NHS funding because of the pressure that the NHS is under. So Hampshire and the Isle of Wight ICB is in what's known as Tier 4 financial recovery. It's literally having to justify every penny it's spending, and it's looking to diminish the resource going into some of these areas.
Thank you. I haven't got any.
Thanks. Steve.
Thank you. It's a brief question and it relates to the longer term rather than the shorter term. But we've seen announcements that that there's progress on 2 new hospitals in the north of the county, Basingstoke and Frimley. And I just wanted to check whether we are providing input on the plans for those that addresses this particular topic.
Yeah, by way of reassurance, yes. And I sit on one of the multiple boards that is meeting around Hampshire Hospitals proposals for a new hospital by 2032. There is also a joint HOSC with regard to Frimley, and there is a joint HASC with regard to Hampshire Hospital. So yes, we are very actively involved, but I think we're actively involved as a stakeholder because this is an NHS endeavour, but we're absolutely providing ongoing comment and support to those 2 programmes.
Super, thanks. Any other comments to note? I suppose I should, thinking about it, I should have perhaps declared an interest in this one, a non-prejudicial one, in the respect that at home I received the other side of the conversation. And having been a councillor in Hampshire now for 9 years, it pretty much matches your tenure, Graham. And what I can report is the amount of moaning about the time it's taken to get people out of hospital from Southampton General has decreased over those 9 years considerably. So thank you for helping my own harmony in my own domestic arrangements. But thanks so much for all you do. Colleagues, we're asked to note the recommendations in section 2 of the paper, subsections 1 to 4. Are we all happy with those? Great. Thank you very much, Graham. There'll be much more squirming to come over the next 10 days, just to let you know. David, we've just got a next paper on our portfolio responsibilities, I think.
Extremely brief paper, Leader. This is simply just a constitutional requirement to report back to the Cabinet and then to the full Council on the executive arrangements that you've already made.
Super, thanks. Are we all happy with what we're doing? Good job. Thank you very much. All agreed. And so finally, end of year financial report. Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. It's quite a varied report, so I'll just take you through some of the key points. If I can just start with paragraph 25. So the table there is probably the key element of this report. It just sets out the revenue outturn for the year. It wouldn't be unusual at the end of the year to see pressures emerging in adults, health and care and children's services. But I would say probably this year we've seen a larger increase in those areas than we would normally see, driven mainly by homeschool transport within children's services. What is unusual is that after we've used cost of change and corporate contingency, we end up at the end of the year with a further draw from balances of 5.6 million. So I've been here 13 years, and I think it's the first time I've seen at the end of the year that we've had to draw more money from reserves. So whilst that's not a good position to be in, I would just point out in paragraph 26, so as part of the revised budget, we did contribute £17.5 million to the budget bridge and reserve earlier in the year. So effectively, we end the year with a net underspend of 11.9 million, which is positive. But as I say, we would normally expect to see a further contribution to reserves at the year end. Just moving to paragraph 43 on the schools budget. So I've been reporting to you at some time. So we've talked about the impact of special educational needs. Obviously, that also feeds through to the cost of providing education in our schools. So the high needs block overspent by 41.4 million. That's a trend that we continue to see. It increases each year. And we ended up with a net pressure on the schools budget of 37.8 million. Obviously, we've got a statutory override in place at the moment. So our cumulative deficit against the DSG reserve is now over 123 million. And I think you've heard me report in the past, by the time that statutory override comes off, we expect that deficit to be around £250 million by the end of 25-26, with no obvious solution in sight at a national level to that problem. Just moving on to paragraph 59. So obviously we do look at our reserves each year. So over the last 10, 12 years, we've seen an increase in reserves each year. But last year we had a movement of £45 million downwards in our revenue reserves. And again, that trend continues for 23-24 with a further draw from balances of 38 million. And again, I've reported to you before, I'd expect to see that every year now our reserves decline as the medium-term financial strategy unwinds. Just looking at the capital programme, so paragraph 84, so we've given you an updated capital programme there, which mainly just rolls the programme forward based on what we agreed in February. Things that haven't started in 23-24, we've rolled into 24-25, which again isn't unusual, although I think having a single year programme of 628 million does look pretty high to me, so I'd be impressed if we get through all of that. And then finally, just to mention within the capital programme and the recommendations that we're putting on to County Council, I am recommending that we increase the Botley bypass scheme by over £16 million. That's arisen mainly due to inflationary pressures that we've seen, but also the bridge construction over part of the river, unusual ground conditions. They've termed it a black swan event. Literally, we've got two aquifers sitting on top of each other, and when that was discovered, we had to change the design of the scheme, which has led to that increase. But it's a long-standing commitment to meet that scheme, which enables lots of activity in the area. So we are recommending that approval is given. That's it from me, but happy to answer any questions.
Super, thanks very much, Rob. Jackie, just to come and say a few words as well. So you should have just stayed there. You don't need to keep walking backwards and forwards.
Thank you very much indeed. Very helpful report, very useful, and certainly I think my question is very simple, really. And this is to you, Councillor Adams-King, how will you as leader seek to get back that 123 million, which will be 250 million by 25-26? I really want to seek a collaborative way, but also realise that you, as the leader of this council, have got the best chance of trying to get that money back so that this council does not go into a Section 114. So all suggestions gratefully received, please. We're all happy to try and help you do that, but just want to make sure that is absolutely key for all of us, I think. But also the school transport bill, which is enormous. And certainly I'm seeking, on behalf of my party, a collaborative approach to reduce this bill by looking how we can manage change, not just set up things that will fail and end up fighting. So we want to be managing that change, and perhaps conversations with schools as well, how they can help with that. I'm not going to go into the capital programme for the rest of it, but I just wanted to say as well that we did amazingly during lockdown to manage our countryside services and achieved a lot, and the public really, really appreciated that. And as we know, with this rain and warm weather, our countryside is looking very hairy and very green, which is great, but it's also not very good for walking and cycling on. So just seeking that we don't take the chop. We take the chop to the green, but not to the budget. But my first question really is about primarily that 250 million by the end of 25-26.
So, thank you. The short answer, so the point I was going to make actually, so my question of Rob, is that 123 million turning into 250 million is not just a problem for us. It is a situation shared by absolutely every council responsible for education and schools across the country. And I think thereby lies our answer. cross-party amongst all three of the main parties in this council, which is that if the government chooses to require to take away the override and require us to find that money, then we are heading for 114, as is every other council in the country. So that thereby, I guess, Rob, would it's certainly a conversation that we've had within Cabinet, outside of this in this space to discuss before. I don't really want to say anything about that.
I mean, so we've been very consistent for very many years now in terms of our lobbying, adult social care, children's social care, special educational needs, and the impact on school transport, and also highways. I mean, those are the things that we have asked for consistently, and will be the things that we ask for from the new government as well. I think the SEM position is particularly pressing because that statutory override comes off. So you've almost got the twin prong issue: local government funding generally and needing to find a solution for that, but almost as big. I think the DSG deficit issue is the other thing that needs solving.
I think so. Turning to school transport, I know Liz, you wanted to mention this as well. Do you want to do your bit first, and then I'll say a couple of words as well.
I just note that it's continually going up. I'm well aware that Steve, before he left here, Steve Crocker, put a paper forward to government about home to school transport. We don't seem to have any comeback, but presumably, I don't know, we're going to get to a stage where we have to say no, because actually it'll affect our other services towards children and vulnerable adults if all the money is going into home to school transport.
It's actually a really good example of the conundrum that we face. We've got a statutory responsibility to provide homeschool transport. If somebody meets the criteria, we have to provide it. And as we've talked about, the special educational needs is what's driving the most of that additional spend. So I think out of the 16 million overspend, I think 9 million of that related to special educational needs. So we're not in a position to refuse it. But I do agree with you, it's taken up ever more resource. And I think one of the suggestions that we've put forward in the past, and I think we might well have put it in the paper, that the productivity paper that we're putting to government, we've said in the past, if you means tested this, we have the ability to take significant cost out. But again, that requires legislative change. As we also point out, going back, that legislation dates back to the 1940s. It cannot be right for modern day society.
So I think sorry, Steve, do you mind if I just, so coming back to your point, Jackie, about that and what Rob said, certainly in the letters that we have sent to the new government, to the Prime Minister, to the Chancellor, to the new Secretary of State, we have raised those points. And I think there is a point at which we would all love to have more money from government. And we know that local government funding has been a challenge for us all, and it's something that needs to be addressed because we are underfunded to provide what we need to do. But realistically, I don't see that anyone's going to come and be handing us pots of cash. So our ask in those initial letters has been to say, give us the tools with which we can then begin to manage things ourselves. And this is a perfect example of what that should be. As Rob says, this legislation dates from the 1940s. It's no longer fit for purpose. So what we're asking for are various legislative changes that enable us to manage things ourselves. We are, though, also looking practically at conversations that Lulu and Kirsty are already starting with the bus companies to see if there is a better way for us to manage that process and to manage things. And we need to look within ourselves for the ways by which we can find those solutions. But we need government to help us too. And that's been the purpose of us taking that forward. I think there is a role for us to play cross-party as well, I have to say. It's certainly a conversation that we're beginning to have around the fact that looking at the ways by which home to school transport is managed elsewhere is one way by which the select committees can help us with that. And that certainly as part of our conversation about how we manage this as a new cabinet, we've begun to involve the select committee chairs in saying how might we be able to do this, and that's obviously something that we'd very much welcome a cross-party approach on, so that we can see it, because who knows what happens next year. This problem is not going to go away for any different administration in this council. Be it the same group of us around this table, or be it your team here in 12 months' time, we'll be having the same conversation. And so we need to work together to find a solution for it. And I think there are various routes by which we can manage that. And so, thank you for the offer of help, because it's something we all have to address. So, Steve, sorry, you wanted to...
Thank you. Yes, quite specifically on the school transport issue, if I can just add to that. I know Councillor Porter has been very helpful at both raising issues on behalf of residents, which is important, and working with us, with officers and members in terms of highlighting those and looking at efficiencies. I just wanted to point out, if I may, the work that's been done over the last couple of years has seen a significant improvement in the way the county operates in terms of providing service to those people booking new school transport at the beginning of the school year. We've increased resource, we've increased the efficiency of our internal administration and management very significantly, and that's yielded massive improvements. We used to have a lot of queries that were raised by members on behalf of residents or direct by residents, and that has significantly reduced. And I hope that will continue. I'm sure it will, thanks to the diligence of our officers. We are looking at being much more efficient, especially if legislation allows. And as the leader just mentioned, Universal Services, Lulu, myself, and many others are involved in working at not just looking at others' best practice, but actually leading on best practice. So we're trying to work towards innovating on that. So this is a real area for us, but we do need to continue to work on a cross-party basis. We do need government to support us, because £1 in every 5 of the money that we spend in children's services goes on school transport, which I'm afraid is not acceptable.
So, any other questions, Jan?
Yeah, just coming back to a sort of more general financial theme, and Rob, you won't know the answer to this, but I'd like your speculation. One of the asks of the CCN and the LGA manifestos that we get some financial security around 3 or 4 year settlements, not just 1 year settlements. And I just wonder, have you any idea of when our settlements are likely to occur? Have you heard anything about the process or the timeline yet from the new government? Thanks, Rob.
So certainly the earlier than expected election will help in that regard. So obviously our local government settlements come out normally back end of November, early December. So that does give them time to put something together. Does that give them long enough to do the long-awaited review of local government finance in that time? Most certainly not. And I think in some respects we probably wouldn't want them to, because we don't want it to be rushed. We need that to be a proper job that looks at everything. So my expectation, and certainly talking to civil servants, they've sort of confirmed this, is that given where we are, we probably are going to receive another single year settlement for 25-26. But then we would expect to see a whole comprehensive spending review in summer 2025, which we would hope would then give us 3-4 years worth of certainty. And hopefully certainty which looks better than the current outlook, because if we get 3 or 4 years worth of potentially flat or declining funds, that doesn't particularly help our position. But yes, certainly help us looking ahead.
Any other questions or comments, everybody? Nope. So I've now lost what we're supposed to be doing. We, I think, are asked to... Where's my recommendation? So we're asked to look at the recommendations that are on page 397 and 398 in paragraphs 3 to 7, for noting the progress and the outturn, and the increase in the capital programme, particularly that additional money for the Botley bypass, which as we've heard. Sorry, I should have said that Lulu and I have been to see the site and to understand what we were doing, and the rest of Cabinet have been briefed upon that. And it's obviously something, it's money that is needed and well spent in delivering the bypass for Botley that's long been awaited. So are we happy with the recommendations? As I say, paragraphs 3 to 7. Agreed. Okay. And that, I think, brings us to the end of this Cabinet meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. We can turn off the broadcast.